maybe one of the good things about having short tenures everywhere I go. And the only reason why is because those are early stage companies.
Well, you said something, and I'm jumping ahead, but we'll address it now. And you and I had a conversation about this in the past, and how you love people out the door.
Yeah.
And how you create the environment of where you are, you know, and the professional way, just loving people, making them feel valued and appreciated, even if it's not the right fit for them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be heavy conflict on the way out, but there's a way, hey, this is just not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
Therefore, I want to see you succeed elsewhere. I want to set you up for success elsewhere.
Yeah. So the way I'd like to describe it in the past is our responsibility as leaders as it relates to our teams is to train them to go, but motivate them to stay as best we can. And so ultimately, to Craig's point, I mean, what we try to do with folks is, again, we love them best by letting them know what we expect from them and by letting them know what they ought to expect from us. And then to the degree that each delivers on their commitment, then everybody's going to be probably fine.
Can you say that again?
That
was really good. No, I hope y'all taking notes.
Better lucky than good. In terms of the commitments, the bilateral nature of commitments, in effect. Well,
no,
we love people best. We love people best when we let them know what our expectations are, and then when we share with them what they should expect from us. Could I actually say that twice in a row? I'm blown away that I could actually.
And you said something earlier I wanted to write down on the board.
I got that, better lucky than good.
Right. The ratio of your dues and the ratio that you say.
So we used to talk about, I used to work for a company that we ultimately sold to General Electric Healthcare, GE Healthcare. And we used to talk an awful lot about the say-do ratio, right? The ratio of the things that you say you're going to do to what you actually deliver on. And to the extent that those are that's a 1-to-1 ratio, you're probably doing pretty well. And we say also, when something that someone says differs than what they do, believe what they do. That'll always be the clearest indicator of who they are. But back to the point, one of the things that I want to do with folks, especially on the exits, and I've unfortunately been in circumstances in companies where, for instance, economically things weren't going in the favor of the company, and so we had declines in industry segments and we had to lay off people. And one of the things that we subscribed to as a leadership team was that it's not enough just to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing in the right way. Even if that means that doing the right thing is releasing somebody or multiple somebodies from employment, you still have to do that in a way that honors them. And that's whether they've had short service or long service. And again, what comes ultimately to pass is, as leaders, how have we treated people? We talk an awful lot about the weight that we leave behind us as if we were a boat going down a lake, right? That wake, if it's destructive, that tells you much more about the vehicle and the manner in which it's driving than it does about the people behind the boat. And so I've tried, and I will say not successfully all the time, admittedly, like some of the conversations that I've had to have in the past didn't go the way that I wanted them to. I take ownership of that. But generally speaking, I want people to feel as honored on the way out as they do on the way in. And there are two times in your world that you will find out what your culture is really about. And that is the time when you onboard someone and the time when you offboard them. Those are your true sellers right there. That'll tell you everything that you need to know about your organization. And I would say at Magnolia, we're very intentional about how we onboard folks. And we try to be pretty intentional about how we offboard them. I would love to see us do that a little bit better over time. And I've been in some companies where we've just done both terribly. And that's always, in my mind, it's like taking your pulse. You either are great or you're not so great. It's either too fast or it's too slow. So you kind of want to be in there just right as much as you can.
Good. A lot of good, a lot of good one-liners. I love it. Okay, let's talk about, great. As far as creating a, open door policy, if someone has an issue, how it's creating I hate to use social work terms here, but a safe place for the discussion when they should bring something to you versus not. Like, how do you create that, open door policy appropriate with boundaries maybe? Yeah.
So from my perspective, my door is generally always open. There are times where I have to close it, and I really hate those times. Part of it is not necessarily making someone feel comfortable coming to you, but making them feel comfortable when you go to them. So my first thing I do when I get in the office in the morning is I grab my coffee cup, but the next thing I do is not necessarily grab my coffee, it's go and say hi to my team with my coffee cup in hand. And I actually do that intentionally because they know that I am a coffee-holic. So if I have an empty cup of coffee, but I stop to say good morning to them first, they know that they've taken priority. And then I get off of my seat and I get out and I go around, or when I go down to the silos, I make sure that I stop and say hi to all the team, or I wave to them when they're afar. People have to understand your approachability before they actually choose to come and approach you. And that is deposits made into a bank account that we have to, as leaders, deposit. And so my door being open or not open really has no relevance unless I've invested in those relationships previously. And so that to me is really the first indicator. And I can have no walls, and if I'm not being approachable to people, they're never going to come talk to me. And so what I try to do is to have an individual relationship as best I can with as many people as I can, and with almost 600 is hard. And so I don't remember everybody's names, and I'm like, hey buddy, hey, how you doing, whatever. But they're going to know in at least a brief moment that I know them and recognize them. And that's key for me. I just walked a couple of friends around the silos yesterday that hadn't been there before, and to show them around, and they had remarked, and this is not to pat myself on the back, but they had remarked that, you know, hey, you know kind of everybody around here. And it's like, well, I get one benefit in this, in my role, people just know who I am or whatever, but it is not just me that's doing that. You'll see our entire leadership team are engaging with people that way. And that even goes to Chip and Joanna when they get down there, which is not often enough for them, but they just can't do it. But the rest of us just follow their example, and we go and try to make sure that we're engaging with the team. And so one time this young lady said, hey, you know, Mr. Rodriguez, I want to be a CFO someday. Can you get together with me and help me understand what that means? And I said, absolutely. And it is only because she and I literally worked side by side at one of the registers at the market during a busy time. And those things get created in those serendipitous moments. And you just have to continue to make the deposits into the account.
That's good. Man, it's really good. This is a very, I'm going to try if I can, supporting staff to be their best selves and empowering them to use their personal gifting. So maybe helping people maybe identify their gifts and helping them walk out in their gifts in the workplace, and empowering them and supporting them.
Yeah. Well, you can't do that unless you know what that is.
Yeah.
And again, that's about more of the engagement, the relationship building and what have you, and just asking someone, you know, just making sure that you know. One of my teammates, her kids are in FFA, and they show bigs and whatever, and they recently decided to buy 76 acres outside of town somewhere. I'm like, sweet, that sounds awesome, way to go, keep going, keep doing it. But I wouldn't have been able to celebrate that with her in the same way if I didn't know that that was a part of her life. And that there's many times where we've been on calls and I'm hearing things in the background. I'm wondering, what in the world is that noise? And, okay, yeah, totally get it now.
Back there.
I get it. Got it. No problem. Don't need to ask any more questions. Don't need any more details. But you know, we've had some teammates who, one of our young accounting staff, her husband had some really bad heart issues, and it was like, okay, got it. We're going to come alongside and embrace you. Your absence will be felt, but not impactful in that sense, right? We're going to make sure that we all kind of fill in the gap of your absence, and we're supporting her and whatever. And you just have to make sure that you find the times to engage. One of our cohorts in our roundtable said it brilliantly just a few weeks back, maybe it was a couple of months ago, where he makes sure that he knows everybody's name on his team. Now, his team's probably smaller than ours, but the intentionality inherent in that. And not just knowing their names, but as he's walking onto a job site to literally stop and have a conversation. So again, these are our teams, these are our employees, but if you saw these folks in a different setting, would you engage with them more? So why would we engage with them less simply because they work for us? Right? If we're having a conversation at the water cooler, at the coffee shop, at the bar, I mean, name your spot. If we're going to engage with them differently simply because they work for us, then we're missing. And so that's what we strive to do, is just try to understand who each other are, understand the successes, understand the pitfalls, like what are we celebrating and what are we lamenting, and try as best we can. Again, I'm not telling you just how to do it well. I'm just telling you this because I know I need to aspire to these levels in order to truly lead in the manner that I desire to lead. And if we're going to leave people better off than we found them, it's got to be because we're having those types of encounters and relationships.
So a lot of different offices in this room have typically smaller offices. It's the field staff they don't see, our caregivers and our CNAs, we don't see as often. But And I hear stories from y'all. I mean, a lot of y'all do a fantastic job recognizing, bestowing value on caregivers and CNAs. And I think, yeah, going that extra mile, you know, trying to meet them in their orientation if you get a chance to, because it's easy to not focus energy and effort on them, because it can also cause a lot of frustration at times. So we're dealing with labor shortages and things like that,
Sure.
and stimulus
Definitely
working against
understand
us,
that, yeah.
all that stuff. So I think that's really good as far as going the extra mile with our caregivers and trying to get to know them as well.
Again, it's just like this, these are people, your people. And maybe just the sheer quantities are difficult to do this with regularity, but literally just calling someone up randomly, if you've got a long commute between office and home, if you just call people and fill that time, I guarantee the drive will be a lot easier because you won't hardly notice it. But just calling and saying, how's it going? How are you? Right? And a lot of times we tend to ask people, how are you doing? Without having any intention of figuring out the answer, at least with any real depth to it. You know, we just ask that as a filler of some other conversation that we're trying to have. But to stop for a moment and just say, no. How are you? How are you doing? How's your family? How are your kids? You know, you told me last time that your son's going off the rails with a 23-year-old. I understand that fully well. How is he? How is he doing? How can we be providing care for you or whatever? Again, I know it's easier said than done. And again, we've got 570 something employees. I can't do that, but I will stop from time to time and just ask my buddy Aaron, who does a lot of the grounds work at the silos, or ask Caleb, who's doing a lot of just the grunt work around the grounds. How's it going, dude? What's going on? You told me that you wanted to start kind of getting into some production. What's going on with that? Or you're in music. How's that going? Or with Aaron, dude, what's the latest thing that you're working on with your car? He's just a car dude, whatever. So just understanding that, and it makes them feel like they're loved. And when you have to then begin to dip into that account and pull some withdrawals out, you at least have some funds in there.
So you have 570 some odd employees. You can't get to them all. How do you, maybe other team members who work for you, how do you get your DNA in them so they are an extension of you? So if we have an HR that's more interacting with our caregivers, how do you get the charismatic Michael into
Right.
employees?
So it's hard, right? Because as a financial person by training, I'm an anomaly, right? Most financial people, the extroverted ones are the ones that live in your shoes when they're talking to you rather than their own. And so I've got a bunch of introverted folks on my team.
Yeah.
But what we forget is that introverts versus extroverts, those aren't people that necessarily don't engage interpersonally. They do, they just do it different ways, where they think our thoughts are processed differently, right? As an extrovert, I process verbally. I've got verbal diarrhea, my wife tells me. And with introverts, it's here that the processing happens. So it doesn't make people less important necessarily. So ultimately, again, it's by modeling, right? So I think we have to model the behaviors that we're trying to elicit. If y'all have kids, you know how that works. It's very, very similar in some ways. But I've also tried to be super focused on it, particularly with our finance team, reminding them that we are essentially customer service functionally, and that our role is to serve rather than to be served or to make rules or what have you. And that's been hard. I have to say that there are a lot of times, particularly for us, we're a family-run business, so any financial decision that we make is ultimately a decision that inures to the benefit or the detriment of Chip and Joanna. And I take that really, really seriously. However, we still have a responsibility as stewards to steward our responsibilities well, in addition to the financial stuff well.
Sure.
So it's been fun because our team has changed and gotten a little bit smaller over the 2.5 years, but I see different countenance being carried out. And that there is, and that's not to say that the people that used to be around were just these terrible ogres or whatever. It's just, I think that it used to be where we were a little bit bitter because we saw the other teams doing different things than we got to do. And it's not very different than in some of the sales organizations that have been in the companies I've led before. The salespeople, they always get to have the fun parties and go out to lunches. And I'm like, bro, I've been in that world with those folks. That is not as fun as you think it is. Yeah. So, and just to know that that's the reality, right? Yeah. The grass is not always greener.
Perception is not reality.
That's exactly right. But just to encourage that type of behavior, rather than sending an email, I will literally tell my team a lot of times, look, don't send any more emails. Just get on the phone with them.
Yes.
Or I've got a better idea. Go walk 100 feet. Yeah. Like your email is I'm emailing you and I'm arguing with you via email. How about if I just do this? Bro, Travis, what's going on, man? Can we solve this issue? Just little stuff.
Yeah.
And firing off an email is great. It's impersonal. It's like these days, people hide behind their phones to go on social media and blow up people. Like, we don't want to do that in our business. We are teammates. We're all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of just that. And again, telling folks what the expectations are and hold them accountable for those expectations.
Really good. I'm going to go off script a little bit here.
Totally.
We got a little bit of time before we jump into Q&A. So last question I'll ask for you, and we'll open it up. Knowing your team, talk about motivation. Are y'all big Enneagram, Magdalena?
I think we all have a sense of our individual Enneagrams, but we don't use those collectively. We use something called Culture Index.
Okay.
And we just got a super huge, very helpful training on that yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
So we have some of the language that we use, but I think virtually everybody understands Enneagram for whatever reason in our teams.
But do you use that so if you know you're going to engage with somebody who might be a 1, a perfectionist or something, so you're 7?
I'm a 7 wing 8, you figured that out.
All right, yeah.
Right on my sleeve.
I'm right there, 7, 8 with you. So what you're using, Culture Index, and you guys are discussing that as a leadership team then, and so you're knowing, do y'all talk about, hey, how can I address, if there's an issue, how do you like to be addressed, or we don't want to walk around on eggshells.
Correct.
Right. So we want to be able to give open and honest feedback and dialogue. And I know sometimes you have really strong personalities in offices, right? And so there can be that.
Oh, sure. I mean, we've got that very same dynamic in my home, right? So my wife and I are totally different. I grew up in a home where when you are at a dinner table, so I'm Puerto Rican, Italian, and Polish. Okay, so 2 of my cultures are very, very, very loud and vibrant, especially the Italian side. So I remember growing up as a kid in the Bronx in New York around a dinner table, and people are literally not just yelling at one another, but there's food flying, and it's not because they're throwing it, it's because they're spitting it. To me, that's like interacting. To me, that's like having a discussion. Fancy meeting. I bring that to my wife, who's Korean and grew up in a family that's super quiet. Oh my gosh, and we've spent 26 years now trying to figure this out, and mostly I'm an idiot, and I'm realizing that doesn't work. And so we have, just even yesterday, to your point, we did a lot of deep dive into Culture Index, and this is with our leaders and directors group, which is about 50 folks outside of just our leadership team, but talking about some of those dynamics. Like, I'm a competitive dude, man. It's like, I look at that and I'm like, okay, how do I win at this? Right, whatever. And you get me a game and I'm like, how do I decide to win it? And that doesn't work with everybody. One of the teams that I lead is our interior design team. I still laugh when I say that. I literally have no clue what I'm even doing with those incredibly talented ladies. But I interact with them very differently. I have to. And so I do think us understanding ourselves and then us understanding our colleagues, ultimately it's about communication. And I can't have a conversation with my wife like I would with like my uncle back in Yonkers, New York. And like we would literally yell at one another. He hates me because I'm not a Yankees fan. I'm the only one in the entire family. And he's like, you can't. And I'm like, but that's how we talk. No, I'm an Angels fan. That's okay. Right. So anyhow.
Gotcha. Okay. Man, good, great stuff. I don't want to.
Don't let me be late, but I definitely want. There's no out of bounds questions, so fire away. Seriously. I've been asked tough ones. Yes, ma'am.
This is strange. You said you've had a lot of different jobs. Is there a reason?
Yeah. You're not good at what I do. No. Linda. No, in all candor. So a long time ago, I decided that I wanted to be in early stage companies. So companies that were startups, private equity, venture capital backed, whatever. So I've purposely not gone to like GE other than being acquired by them where I had no choice. And generally speaking, I've been in companies where they were technologies that were being developed or in the life sciences and cancer diagnostics world where a lot of times your whole purpose is to build it to a place where someone else can buy it. And so I've fired myself multiple times when we've sold companies. A couple of times I laid myself off because I was way more expensive than 4 other people that could have otherwise been laid off. It's a little frenetic. My wife hasn't always appreciated my entrepreneurial nature. But yeah, I mean, generally the life cycle has been around 3 years. So I'm almost past that now with Magnolia. Who would have thought? So yeah, it's hard in some sense, but I'm a little bit ADD in what I do. Like the fact that we have probably a dozen different businesses in Magnolia is so right down in the middle for me. Because any given day I might be talking about our production business, the network, renegotiating with Discovery. Our realty business was just meeting with our e-commerce lead this morning. I talk with our food ops leader all the time. I'm like, hey, we don't have a dinner place. We need to have a dinner place. Why don't we have a dinner place? Talking about expansion. I just negotiated the purchase of the property across the street. I'm working on project managing that to fruition. We've got our hotel just down the street the other way. The castle that's down there being kind of developed with some programming. So I get to live in a bunch of different worlds all at the same time. It's really a blessing. So, yeah.
Question. I think I'm more like your wife.
Okay, cool.
Because I'm trying to understand.
My wife is way cooler. You would love her way more.
I think I'm the one that, so I work with people and I try to work with them until we've exhausted all avenues. And I think I give so many chances. What is that line of diminishing returns where it no longer is working? Because and it gets to a point where it turns ugly.
Yeah.
You know, there's just that point, and I don't know what that point is.
Yeah.
I'm working and trying to make things work with off support staff, and there's, you know, my husband's like, you've got to cut it off. You've got to cut it off, but I'm trying to help them get to that place.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great question. I don't know that I've necessarily found the sweet spot, because I'm the type of person that likes to believe the best about people also. And that's really worked against me a couple times. Yeah, it's like, no, I know that they didn't mean to call me an a-hole. I know it. Okay, maybe not. It's hard. What I would say is you actually touched on something I think is brilliant, and that is because we think the way that only we think, that getting input from others is really powerful. Whether it's your husband, I do that with my wife. I don't listen to her as much as I ought to. But people, when you have people around you who are different, who do round you out, that's actually incredibly important. Because I can only see out of these two eyes that I've got. And so to ask somebody else what they're seeing, and I've got one teammate right now, back to, you know, I've gotten to the place where I believe she needs to exit. And yet it's because it's just getting so discomforting because I'm allowing stuff and shenanigans to happen. And so again, I'm not giving y'all this advice because, you know, I'm doing it well. I'm probably mostly giving it to you because I'm not using it right now, so that's great. But I do think that we have to, one, try to define what is it that we want from this person. And then the minute we see, something controverting that, you got to point it out. It's like, I need you to jump right there. And the second that they jump there and they look at you and say, I jumped, it's like, yeah, I know, but this is where I wanted you. The sooner you can do that, the better. It'll help you kind of begin to aggregate the feedback loop so that you know that you're kind of building up this case for this stuff. But also, frankly, the person's going to know also. Yeah, and the thing we forget, I think, a lot of times is someone who's not performing, they know. They know they're not performing. And it's probably more uncomfortable for them than it is for us as leaders. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've told someone, hey, I think it's time for us to separate. And they're like,
Really?
Kind of like, thank you. Yeah.
Relief.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of that place where you do the right thing the right way.
Yeah.
And so like at Magnolia, this is, again, it's an extension of Chip and Joe. They are incredibly generous, benevolent people. So when we let somebody go, my normal nature is, man, you should have been fired yesterday, so you take off. But we're like, no, we need to actually, we give them a significant runway financially to equip them to land somewhere. And that is like just a very one individual tangible need. But then we actually, if we're really doing what we ought to be doing, we should help them understand, hey, don't go and do this again. You weren't successful in this environment, so let me maybe think about some other environments I personally observing you might suggest that you go and point yourself. Or, hey, we've been talking a lot about this for the last 6 to 12 months. So let's make sure that you're pulling away from this, the nuggets that I was hoping that you're pulling away. And even if you're coming to the same environment someday, let's make sure that you remember these things. And then we're setting them up for success. But I will tell you, I tend to be later than sooner.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not. Like we have another individual, I'm not trying to fire my whole team. We have another individual on our team right now who it's getting uncomfortable, and it's performance related, and it's attention to detail. And in the finance world, that's super critical. And it's just past the point of being salvageable. And every day I'm asking my VP finance and my controller, I'm like, hey, what are we doing? How are we doing? What's going on? And it's just kind of getting delayed, and I think it's just getting disconcerting for all of us. So sometimes we have to just kind of push ourselves on that. Yes, sir.
I don't know if that's like the perfect question to ask, because I wouldn't say that there is a formula for this.
Sure.
But each one of us in a certain way desire feedback. And whether that's from someone in touch position or from someone we're exiting with.
Yeah.
I think that, something as a young person running a business is I have to thrive off of what they tell me.
Yeah.
We failed in. Just out of curiosity, where do you lead someone or set that tone for when to get feedback and when not to?
Yeah, so it's got to be in your day-to-day accountants. It can't be like, hey, now that I'm firing you, how did I do? Because they'll tell you. I literally just last year had an individual who, in actual words, told me basically to shove it as he was exiting. He just grabbed his stuff. Right, yeah. And I'm like, okay, bro, thanks, man, appreciate it. And I had been providing him feedback all along. What I would say is there's a number of different ways to make it easy for your team to provide that feedback. So one, remember too, that if I come to you and I say, hey, I'd just love feedback on how I'm doing, I might be putting you in a super uncomfortable spot right there. That might not be your particular jam. I've got some people on my team who would say, well, let me just tell you, last week when you said that, you really ticked me off. And then yesterday, you didn't even hear me even a little bit. So one of the things I like to try to do is every year I do what's called a start, stop, continue. And I just kind of put out an anonymous questionnaire. I said, hey, what are the things for me as a leader that you'd like to see me start doing? What are the things that you'd like to see me stop doing? And what are the things you'd like to see me continue doing? And to the degree that you can truly anonymize that, that will be really rich. You'll find a lot of really good wisdom and nuggets in that. So if you have the ability from a technological standpoint to put out a SurveyMonkey or something similar where they really do feel like they can't know, and then you also have to have a big sample size. So if you're asking 3 people, chances are you're going to figure out by the way that they've written or what they've said who they are. So try to get a big group and make it mixed. So that would be one way I'd say it. And then again, if you have one-on-ones with your team, start from scratch and just basically say, hey, how can I be supporting you better? What are the things that you need from me? And so a lot of times, in leaders, we'll go and we'll have a one-on-one with someone. We'll say, okay, so here's my list. Make sure that you did this, and this. Got it? Ready? Break. Rather than saying, hey, what's going on? So my boss does this really well. I work for our president, who then reports up to Chip and Joe. And so I'll go to him, and he asks me for my list first. And so that's broken down by FYIs, follow-ups, things to know, things like that. And I just go down my list, and I present that to him first. And then I got it. Cool. Here's what I got for you. And it actually makes me feel like I'm equipped, and I'm actually being heard on the things that I need his help on first. And then it's my to-do list from him. So that's another way of doing it. Make it part of your regular routine. If you're going, I tend to be the type of guy with my one-on-ones with my team where I'm like, hey, what's going on? No list, no agenda, no nothing. I need to keep myself focused and put a list in their hands and say, okay, so here's how we'll kind of conduct these. Any feedback on the way that we're conducting these, because there's something that can be more helpful. So just some of those trade tricks that you can use to make sure that you're listening to feedback. And then make sure that when they say it, they know you've heard it and that you're putting it into action. Let them see that stuff. Otherwise, you'll kill it. If they're like, oh, I just tell him and he doesn't even care, or he didn't even hear me, you're never going to hear it again.
It's 11:40. I don't want to keep you. I know you got to talk.
We got 5 minutes, man. I drive.
Okay, all right.
I drive fast.
Okay, make it good questions here for Michael. How often do you do the start, stop, continue? What was the?
It's once a year.
Once a year.
Yeah. And,
Have you ever found employees asking you the same question? Things that you would want them to stop, start, and continue?
I haven't had the team turn around and do that with me just yet, but I have had other leadership team colleagues start to do the same thing. And I've actually started incorporating it even into our interviews. Like I was just hiring an IT director and a project management office director. And I would put that in my interviews with them. So tell me about what your teams would say that you as a leader should start, stop, continue. And it's actually interesting. I've had one guy literally just look at me on the Zoom call and was like, I said, do you want to come back to that one? No problem. It's okay. Because it is. It's kind of one of those things that gets you kind of, if you're not ready for it, it'll knock you over. It's kind of hard. And then be the type of people, be the type of leaders that internalize that so well that someone could ask you that. What does your team say? Not that you're ever going to be interviewing for another place or nothing like that. My point is, if you can actually articulate those things, then people will be able to know that you're real about it. So for me, it's like my team wants me to have reasonable expectations. Like I don't actually do the work, but I have the vision for the work. And I'll be like, all right, let's do this. We got these 6 systems we can implement by next week, right? And they're like, dude, are you insane? No way. You know, and then, so that was the stop expecting them to be able to do more. And the continue was just being gregarious, being a complete child and whatever, without being an insanity case in the office. But I basically am, like my wife says all the time, I'm her firstborn. And that's pretty much true. So that's good. And the start, I think, for them is really just to take time and to unpack more often with them. And so what I've been able to do is I've asked my assistant to block off the second half of Friday every week, which we're probably at about a 50% hit ratio on that. But that allows me just to settle and have quiet time and then to be able to go and actually have just good, relaxed conversations. Most of my days are like 8 to 6. And it's just meeting after meeting straight through. And I'm not helpful for my team when I'm in that vibe. So.
And one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you stop in everyone's office in the morning?
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that, and my husband always reminds me I should do that.
Yeah.
How long do you spend with each one?
Well, some of it depends. Like one of my guys, it's super funny, but he keeps his door closed all the time. And I have to fight myself to like object to that, right? But what I'll do with him is I'll just walk by and he's got like a little square window and I'll just walk by and I always catch his eye. I never have to knock for some reason. And I got my coffee cup and I'm like, hey Mitch, what's up, bud? And I just walk along. But it's just a pass in, pass through, you know, and it doesn't need to be much. But they know that if I do anything before I get coffee, that it must be important. Because I do not stop before coffee. Yes, ma'am, absolutely, feel free.
Personal, professional. Do you ever do anything with your team outside of work?
Yeah, on occasion, not enough. Like my VP Finance and I just went to a baseball game last week, and it was because we were invited by our bank. But I enjoyed doing stuff like that a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. I took my entire team on a Waco tour. The guys that started Waco tours are friends of mine. And I said, man, it would be fun for our team, many of whom are from Waco, to do this and just see what they think. But also, it's just kind of a fun but goofy experience. And then there's several of the team who are young parents, and so it makes that a little bit less feasible at times. My controller does a great job. She takes her team out once a month to lunch, and I got to admit that I am so bad at that, really. But then we also have times, even in the context of work, to be able to go, like right now, we're super behind on our shipments out of our distribution center because of Joe's birthday sale and all this other crazy stuff. And so we literally would just go over to the warehouse and work together. So even in the working beside one another, it can be kind of fun. Yes, sir.
Question, this one's one from Zoom.
Yeah.
Do you think the start, stop, continue would work with lower level hourly employees?
I don't see why not, right? I mean, I suspect regardless of your status in the company, your level in the company, they're going to have opinions.
Sure.
Right, and to some degree, hopefully it's because you're interacting with them enough for them to develop that opinion. And I think in that context, it might be even more important to anonymize it to be able to let them feel like they've got a free rein to be able to say something so that they're not just fired for saying the wrong thing.
Survey monkey, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, no matter what job you do,
Sure.
you know, we want to go and do the job well and be appreciated for it. And, you know, the top two reasons people leave their jobs, the first one is their boss. And the second one is their coworker. So if you can solve that first one, you just took one of the biggest reasons why people leave their jobs right off the table. And as leaders, I can't see any other more effective thing that we can do to keep continuity, keep people feeling fulfilled in their work, and then most importantly, whatever it is you do to serve your clients, your patients, whatever, or what we do to serve our guests that come in the 30 to 40,000 a week to Waco, Texas, for crying out loud. If I help them do a better job of that, everything else gets handled really, really well.
7:45.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing y'all again sometime. I'll see you in a couple weeks. God bless, guys.
Thanks so much. I know, I think wrong with me.
Mark, you're right.
Not really. Mine's a little lower. Mine's 18, 19, 18, 95.
Good, I thought there's some good, I just kind of wrote down in here. Yeah, I just kind of, wrote something, I think that's start, stop, continue. Here to say ratio, clear expectations, man. Team meetings, I was sitting on this, Bo asked a question. Exit interviews, I didn't want to take Michael's time to say this, but exit interviews, oh man, if you're not doing them, you're missing out. That is I have an exit interview form, and I need to put it on a Google Drive for everybody, but it is so telling because we all want to grow and opportunities and other things. Typically, there's always things that we could probably do a better job of. And so, man, that's a great, like you said, you don't want to hear it all on the way out, but sometimes if you don't know it, you can get it on the way out and temper it. Sometimes you might be frustrated, but at the same time, if there's just be open, self-reflective, self-aware. Boy, exit interviews I think there's a lot of gold in those too. Has anyone done one that's been super helpful?
I don't do the exit, but I do.
No, you just asked and I said yes.
I do this with not only my people in the office, but also with caregivers that have to come in. I'm terrible at delegating, especially when it's a problem, because I've sat in every single chair. So the caregivers
you do it all. You've done it all.
I know them, and I've hired them, and whatever. And so instead of pushing that to my HR person, and bring them in. They were late or no call, no, just bring them in, schedule a time, and I'll sit down with them. And so what I do is need from me, need from you. Every week I do it with everybody in the office. What do you need? What do you need from me? And then this is what I need from you. So when caregivers come in, when I have to make this, sit down, and I do that with clients as well. The client's big, giant pain in my sit upon.
No, I appreciate it.
I will say, need from me, need from you. What do you need from me to make this better? And this is what I need from you. And if it works most of the time, again, it doesn't fix anything, or doesn't fix everything all the time, but especially with the staff in the office, gives them an opportunity to tell me what they need from me first, and then I hear you, I'm going to do it, or try to do it, whatever will work together, what I need from you. Caregivers really, really works well. What do you need from me? I need more hours. Great. I need you to show up on time.
Amen.
I need you to take shifts. I need more money from you. Fantastic. I need you for me to fulfill your need. This is what I need from you to do that. So I try to create that symbiotic, and I use the word, it's a symbiotic relationship. If you need something from me, I need something from you. Let's figure out a plan to both get what we want. So, there you go.
Good.